Hello, today as I walk along, I want to talk about the notion of accelerationism. This is a subject maybe I've covered before. I don't know, but I feel the need to discuss it again. Accelerationism is a belief that is held by some on the dissident right. Now, in its most radical forms, it'll be, people who actually go out and commit crimes, like whoever it was in New Zealand who supposedly shot up the mosque, killed a bunch of innocent people, or was it was it a mosque or was it some other exotic house of worship? Anyway, the story is, if we can believe the story, that he murdered a bunch of people, and his explanation for why he did it was that he was against mass immigration, and he knew that now, having committed this, what people would call a hate crime, it would make everything worse. It would make the government crack down harder. It would take guns away from the citizens. If citizens were even allowed to have guns before that in New Zealand, I'm not sure. But my impression was that they very quickly gave them all up. That wouldn't happen here in the good old US of A. A lot of problems with the good old US of A, but you're not going to get people to give up their guns here. Give us Americans that much. We're not gonna give up our guns without a fight. Got to bring the fight to us, and we're ready for it. But anyway, this is what he had in mind. He thought there's going to be more repression, and this will probably make the problem even worse. And then that will eventually, when the problem gets worse and worse, eventually it'll lead to a crisis period where there will be so many people pissed off about mass immigration and being displaced in their own countries by their governments, or by the globalist cabal, more accurately, and there'll finally be an uprising, and things will be restored to where they should be. That was his notion of what would happen, and that's accelerationism in a nutshell. Now, I guess, to be fair, there are accelerationists who don't go out and murder a bunch of people, but who still let me just take a minute to appreciate this flag. Trump won, save America. That's what it says. Trump won, save America. It is related. That sign is related to what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to elaborate anymore. So I'm just going to keep this as abstract as possible, or as broad as possible. So the idea behind accelerationism is the worse the better. Because the system can't be saved, and no argument here, I don't believe the system can be saved, then no argument on that point. There is an argument. I do have a very strenuous argument with the rest of accelerationism, but I will concede that the system can't be saved. So anyway, the idea is you'll force a crisis, and then after the crisis, there'll be a restoration by force, if necessary, of proper authorities who will protect the citizenry and won't go in for schemes like mass third world immigration. All right, so my problem with accelerationism is it takes for granted that things are just going to get worse and worse, and you might as well accelerate that momentum, so the worst parts will we'll get it over with, like ripping the Band-Aid off, and then there'll be a lot of unpleasantness, but then things will be restored to their rightful place after that. First of all, I wonder if any accelerationist has children, because if you have children and you care about the state of things, then you don't want your children to grow up in a world where everything is shit. Now, that doesn't mean that you just become passive, or that you just bow down to the illegitimate authorities in hoping that they'll treat you better. No, you don't do that, but you also don't behave in a manner that will make things worse, right? You want to, I get the idea, I totally get wanting to restore something of value, but I don't think you get there by making things worse. And if you make things worse intentionally, then you're making a worse world for your kids. That's why I have a hard time accepting that any true accelerationist could actually be a loving mother or father. The second problem I have with accelerationism is it's built on a fallacy. And the fallacy that it's built on is that once things break down, people will come around to your ideology, to the ideology that you want them to have, when actually, when things break down and it's chaos, and anarchy in the streets, well, there's just as much of a chance that the people will cry out for greater tyranny than that they will call out for your party or your ideology to take over. So take the example of the New Zealand shooter. I should also say a third problem with accelerationism, at least when it comes to people who actually murder a bunch of people, is that murder is wrong. And I don't countenance anything like any activity like that. And I condemn every activity like that, regardless of who does it, regardless of who the victims are. There is such a thing as self-defense, of course, but I don't agree if you're going to say this is really when he murdered all these men, women, and children, he was really doing it in self-defense in a broader sense. Like, that's sophistry, if you want to make that argument. He was defending his people because he was intending for, to make things worse, and then when things got worse, then things would get better. No, that doesn't work. That's completely amoral. So anyway, but back on the idea of when there's chaos, when you've created a situation that things have broken down and there's chaos in the streets, then how do you know that people aren't going to just cry out for swift, some greater tyranny to put everything down swiftly, to stop all of this chaos and to restore some kind of order? And who's there to step in? Your fringe ideology, or the globalist goons? The latter have got a lot more power, a lot more clout, a lot more money than you do. So you're probably playing into their hands. I don't know whether the globalist goons want there to be white on immigrant hate crimes, but they certainly benefit from it. Hey, let me amend that. They probably do want those things to happen because they don't really care about loss of human life. They just want to advance their power and control. And if a white guy shoots up a bunch of brown people in a mosque, they are enabled to gain more power. And there's more, all the things they already claim about white men being domestic terrorists. You find a white man, scratch a white man, you'll find a domestic terrorist, all the rhetoric that you already hear from them. Now they'll have actual cases, real cases to point to. So, no, accelerationism is not good, should not be tried, should not be engaged in. Civil disobedience, yes. Self-protection, protection of your family, yes. And so forth. Do what you have to do to keep your family safe. But that's not the same thing. It's hardly the same thing. And it's sheer sophistry to try to make that claim. So this is why I say avoid accelerationism. So what should we do? Well, everything falls apart. Well, we don't know where things are going for sure. We never know. So you have to get some distance from it. You have to carve out a niche for yourself and for your loved ones, and then just see what happens. And hopefully, I mean, I've got kids. If you've got kids, you maybe sympathize with what I'm saying. Hopefully, things won't get really terrible. But I'm also not counseling just being passive. I do stuff. Do whatever you think, wherever you think your gifts are, to make things better. Then use your God-given gifts to protect your way of life and your family's lives and livelihoods. Do all of that. I'm trying to think if I have anything to add. I was in South Africa in 2011, and I remember people talking then. I went from place to place and met with different Afrikaner spokesmen and advocates and activists, and I remember people were buzzing at the time about how when Mandela dies, then it's on. Things are going to get really bad really fast, because Nelson Mandela, even though he was a terrorist and he killed innocent people before they arrested him, after he was arrested and after he was released and after he became president of the new South Africa, he was a voice for moderation, and he was saying, let the whites have their place in the new South Africa, and let the people who want to gather in Orania, just among their own kind, he said, leave them alone, let them do that. They can do that. I'm not saying that makes Nelson Mandela a great guy or anything. I don't know if he did this out of an abundance of because his heart grew in size from the time when he was bombing innocent people in the 70s and 80s. But, or I don't know where his magnanimity came from, but or whether it was just realpolitik or whatever. But he was a moderating force, and so the fear was among these Afrikaners, these Afrikaner activists that I spoke to. The fear was that after he died, the moderating force would erode, and things would get really bad. Now in South Africa, in 2011, things were really bad, and as far as I know, they're still really bad. So it's just a question of bad or worse. If you visit South Africa, like the neighborhood I'm walking through here in the United States of America, as crummy as things have gotten in the United States, most people live in houses like these. But if you walk through a neighborhood in South Africa, like a middle-class neighborhood, they all have gigantic walls with barbed wire at the top. This was the case in 2011, and you can't just. They all have massive security systems. We're talking about for regular homes. That made a very strong impression on me, and they had good reason to do so, because crime was rampant and black on white crime was especially rampant. Although there was also, to be fair, there's also plenty of black-on-black crime too. So anyone with money, black or white or any other race, would be sure to have a ton of security. So things were already accelerated beyond what they're like here in the United States or elsewhere in the West. Even though I would say the United States has declined significantly since 2011, and the West in general has declined precipitously since 2011. But anyway, sticking back to the point I was making, going back to the point I was making, when Mandela died in 2013, there wasn't this mad rush to there weren't these. They didn't just suddenly. There wasn't this Rwanda-like action where they drove around in cattle trucks and rounded up all the white people and forced them into camps and then shot them or anything like that. All the things that were feared didn't happen. Or they thought that something similar to what had taken place in Zimbabwe earlier would happen in South Africa to the farmers. Now the farmers were especially vulnerable to crime, and some of the crimes that the farmers saw were just absolutely horrific crimes committed against their family members. So, and this is 13 years ago. But I guess I'm just, what I'm saying here is, even in South Africa, where things were definitely worse, way worse, than the United States or most of Europe is today, even with all the problems that are going on. The prediction didn't come true. And so you don't really know what's happening. You don't really know what the future will bring. And you can't really say when A happens, then everything will go nuts. Everyone, it'll get really bad really fast. I mean, in South Africa, it's relative because it was really bad. It's been really bad for a while. But it'll get far worse very fast. So, I don't know a whole lot about South African politics, what's happened since 2013, since the death of Mandela. I haven't checked up a lot. My impression is, though, that things are mostly the same as they were in 2011. Now, I might be wrong. It's just not like sometimes. My greater point is sometimes conditions remain stable, even if they're less than optimal, right? The way life was in South Africa for the Afrikaners especially was far from optimal. But I haven't gotten the impression that, well, certainly nothing dramatic happened when Mandela died, and I don't think things have gotten significantly worse. So, what am I saying? As bad as things are here or wherever you live, we don't know what the future is going to bring. We should be apprehensive. We should be cautious. We should keep an eye out stay awake, be ready, like it says in the Gospels. But attempting to decipher the course of things is a fool's game. And there are always alarmists saying, "That's it. Things are just going to be totally rotten now forever. We've crossed the Rubicon." And the thing is, sometimes alarmists are right, but I don't think one should live one's life in a state of alarm. I don't think you can go on like that. And that's why maybe, I don't know who I'm talking to here. If you're still watching this at this, the 26-minute mark, then God bless you. Maybe consider less engagement with social media. Maybe consider less engagement with news that is upsetting, or with news sites that want to incite your fear and loathing and so forth. I don't know if I've always been innocent myself, or if I've been unduly alarmist from time to time. I'm certainly no optimist. So, but I think it's very important, even for, I think it's important even for me, and I know I'm not very influential, but I know there are people who do watch this channel or read my stuff or whatever, and I really don't want to steer people wrong. I mean, you want to be irreverent, you want to be cheeky sometimes, you want to show that you're not, you want to show that you're not someone who puts up with shit. Not to be a tough guy, but just to show that you're not a coward. But if I've ever committed the sin of alarmism, if I've ever come on and been really and talked about things in a way that just made you absolutely feel like, there's no hope, there's absolutely no hope, then I repent of that. And that's why I've come out so swinging. That's why I've really come out swinging against black-pilled content. I know black pill content has its defenders, and they tell me I'm misunderstanding what the black pill is, but I don't think I am. I really don't. You can say I'm old and out of touch, but I don't think I am on that point. I think I grok what black pill means, and I've just got no use for it. And you shouldn't have any use for it either, because you can't afford it right now. You can't afford to pay attention to people who feed into your fear and your sense of dread and hopelessness. So if listening to me makes you feel dread and hopelessness, even though I've tried to make that not be the case, then stop listening to me. If somebody else makes you feel dread and hopelessness, stop listening to that person or reading that person. It's not always easy, because sometimes somebody's really good. You might find a writer who's really funny, for example, who's incredibly witty. And I have someone in mind here. I'm not going to name him by name, but maybe some of you will guess who I'm talking about, somebody who's been around for a long, long time and who's always extremely entertaining to read, and incredibly talented at what he does, an incredibly talented writer. But I think if you read his stuff, well, I'll just say for myself, I had to stop reading him. No, even though I knew he was excellent. He was an excellent. He is an excellent writer. He's a better writer than I could ever be. But he so relentlessly focuses on the sordid and the miserable, and so relentlessly, goes for not your tear ducts, but he doesn't try to make you sad. It's like reading him makes you really, really angry at certain people who are probably really bad people. But the thing is, the anger is never leavened in his case, or I've never seen it leavened with anything. And so what are you really feeding people? You're feeding people, I mean, the good things are that you write well, that's clever, that's funny, maybe you make people laugh, and that's always a good thing to do. But on the other hand, you're making people feel more embittered and more outraged and more ultimately hopeless. I had to stop reading this person. I could. There is somebody else I will mention by name that hasn't been around for a while, but another writer who is I don't know anything about where she is now, but she was, when I read her stuff, she was an incredibly gifted writer, really good at using words, just an exquisite wordsmith, and really good at making certain points. And I'm talking about Ann Coulter. For those of you old enough to remember her, I think her heyday was maybe in the 90s, but especially in the aughts, during the Bush years, during the War on Terror years. And I always thought to myself, this lady is really, really smart. This lady would make an incredible, DA. Probably a much better one than Kamala ever was. She's really, really smart. Really has it together. I always thought, when people just dunked on Ann Coulter for just being a bitter old shrew, I thought they weren't. It wasn't fair. They weren't seeing how much talent she had and how funny she was. It was just that she thrived on outrage, and that the fact that she thrived on outrage made her say more and more outrageous things, and eventually, even though I really liked her, I had to stop reading her eventually for the same reasons. I thought this is high quality stuff, but it's only making me feel angry, and it's not making me feel inspired. It's not making me feel anything positive, really. It's making me hate people who are doing bad things, or making me angry with them, and that's it's good to be outraged by people who are doing awful things, but when that's all you hear, and it's funny too, as I said about the other person who I wasn't naming by name, but it's just like my impression was, this is not, this is not like reading Julius Evola. This is not like reading G.K. Chesterton. This is not like reading Soren Kierkegaard. This is not like reading C.S. Lewis. All of those guys that I just mentioned were aware of grave evils and wrote about them very eloquently. But you didn't come away from reading their material feeling just enervated because of all the outrage that they've whipped up in you. You come away from those authors, maybe sometimes a little baffled in the case of Evola or Kierkegaard. But if you can understand what you're reading, you come away thoughtful. It engages the mind more than it does the spleen. So find people like that. Find people who engage the mind and not the spleen. A little splenitism here and there, a little bit of a few mordant takes on this or that idiocy is fine. But just make sure you're not just being led down this path to either despair or just feeling so outraged that you're just drained, and all you have is hatred in your heart for all the terrible people out there. Do what you can to avoid that, because what you put into your mind is as important as what you put into your mouth. You want to eat a healthy diet. You want to take care of yourself. You also want to read, and you also want to consume material that is good for your soul and good for your mind. And that doesn't just leave you pissed off and angry and black-pilled. So I didn't know I was going to take things in that direction. I just felt like there's a little bit more to be said after the first 15 minutes where I was talking about accelerationism. Again, thanks to everyone who watched this through to the end. And if you did watch this through, give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Give me one of these if you liked it, just because I kind of like to know who with these longer videos who really sticks with it, because I think you're great, and I have an abundant thankfulness for you. I'm thankful to anyone who tunes in for any length of time, but the ones who watch the whole thing, you're special people to me, even though I probably don't know who you are. All right, I'll end it there.